I'll kick us off here. First one in the Discord, first office hours in the Discord. Had a great experience over at UMA on their stage when we did the Dig Dojo on Tuesday, so wanted to try it out for ourselves. If it works out, we'll likely hold office hours in this channel moving forward. It's very Twitter Spaces-esque, which is kind of cool. But yeah, interested to know what people's feedback is after the call. Unlike our sort of old way of doing things, we don't have a chat built in here, but we do have the ability for folks to raise their hand and come up and speak. But alternatively, we've set up an office hours discussion channel just above the stage where we can continue the chat throughout. We'll pull questions if people want to just have a conversation there. That's great too. But yeah, welcome feedback after on how everybody feels about stages in the Discord. And with that, our topic for today is the Boost Power Up, which is timely with the release of the BIP and, of course, some exciting stuff launching this afternoon. So I'll hand it over to you, John.
Great. Thanks, Will. Yeah, so this is our first run through here. If you've been on one before, obviously not that much verbal chat. Maybe we'll get a little more luck here. But as I said, feel free to hit the office hours discussion channel right above this, and we'll be checking in there, picking out any questions, and making sure we hit on all of them. So the topic for today is the Badger Boost Power Up. So for those who have been around for a while, Badger Boost, I think, was originally proposed like in February. It's been around for a while. I mean, at least in Badger time. I guess it's not that long ago in real time, but in Badger time, probably over half of the life of Badger. It's been kind of a concept, and the original was built out without there being there's a different environment for Badger in that people had joined and started contributing. We were coming off of the 8-week multiplier. So for those who weren't around earlier, when originally Badger, when you deposited, your multiplier started at 1 and then went all the way up to 3 over an 8-period time frame. So basically addresses, and what does a multiplier mean? If you put $1,000 in a vault, when the emissions are happening, Badger's being emitted, and that's happening pro rata, the numbers that are going into that calculation are adjusted by a multiplier. So if you were someone who had deposited day one, you put $1,000 in, that would count as $1,000 worth of Bitcoin when doing the calculation to determine how much Badger you should get relative to everyone else. If someone else had put in $1,000 worth of Bitcoin, the same amount 8 weeks beforehand, then they would have a multiplier of 3. Theirs would be $3,000. So if there was $100 being emitted, they would get 100 Badger being emitted, they would get 75. You would get 25, even though you both have the same deposits. And then over time, 8 weeks in the future, you would have a multiplier of 3. They would still have a multiplier of 3 because that was the max, and then you would be even. It would be splitting 50-50. So the thought was always, all right, how do we continue, move away from just a pure time-based multiplier? Because we don't want to, we want to continue rewarding people that are contributing to Badger and keeping their assets in Badger, but also we don't want to totally make it very difficult for new participants, new depositors to get a decent boost. We don't want them to be kind of fighting this massive uphill battle. And we also wanted to tie some value back to the Badger token and kind of use that as something, an indication of your support of the project. So the original boost was built off of a simple calculation for stake ratio, which is basically how much Badger you have divided by how much not Badger you have. And we call that native and non-native balance. So native balances are your Badger LP, I believe Dig or Dig LP are included in there as well. And then your non-native balance is anything that doesn't include Badger assets. So, direct, the Bitcoin vaults, basically. Also the LP vaults, anything that doesn't have Badger or Dig in it is included in there. So that ratio of how much native over non-native you have is the drives your stake ratio. And the way that the original boost worked was that we basically just ranked people by their stake ratio and then rolled from a max boost of 3 down to a minimum boost of 1, meaning you just get the same value of your assets over time. But then we adjusted that down by the size of your non-native balance. So the top would be 2.999, and then depending on how much the next address in the list ordered by stake ratio holds of non-native, then it would move down proportionally, instead of just being a straight, a straight linear move. And that has worked for a bit, in that the higher the stake ratio you have, the more the more assets, the more Badger that you're receiving, the higher boost that you get. And the original idea behind it was to make it somewhat competitive, in that you can find these various cliffs where there's like larger addresses that make it a bigger gap between, you know, a larger gap in multiplier between from one address to another, and then try to kind of move above that. But I think what was not necessarily taken into account or appreciated is how heavily we're in a barbell type situation, where there's a couple addresses that have giant balances, and then there's a whole bunch of addresses that have smaller balances, to where the larger balances kind of sucked up all the boost and just kind of push people in different categories. Either you're like right at 3, or you're at like 1.5, or you're at 0, is kind of how it played out. So makes it a little less gamified. So if you're at 2.97, there's not much of a reason to go to try to get to 2.99. So yeah, that's when we started evaluating what we can do to adjust, and take what we've learned since it launched a couple months ago, and build out a better model. And there's a lot of discussion on how we could do it better. And I think and I'll let Poe kind of chime in the office hours discussion chat too, if there's a couple things he wanted to call out that he was specifically targeting. But I think what we wanted to do is make it easier for people to understand. So if we're going to try to gamify this thing, you have to have a good understanding of the rules, and be able to visualize it better, and kind of be able to target where you want to be. And then we also just wanted to make it spread out a bit more. So push the distribution higher to people that are supporting Badger even more, and then make sure people that are just kind of farming and dumping Badger and not holding on to it, well, let's stop giving them as much Badger, is kind of the takeaway. And then so we're taking those two things into account, and then we had a long discussion with a bunch of folks, and really appreciate all the conversation in the Discord around some different options and different models, and how we can kind of accomplish those goals, and then comparing it to kind of where we are currently, and then kind of what we wanted. A lot of these cryptoeconomic models, you're kind of starting with the general ideal, and you kind of work your way back into it, and just model around it and tweak it until it seems to fit. So given the current data that we had, we wanted it to such that the people at the very top of the distribution, the highest stake ratios, would be getting many multiples more proportional Badger than they are now, and then the people at the expense of the people at the very bottom that are basically dumping all their Badger and not holding on to it, let's just stop giving them Badger pretty much altogether. We'll give them some if they hold a little bit of Badger, but if you don't hold any Badger, then you're really not getting anything. I mean, you'll get some, but it'll be very small. How can we kind of build that into a scalable model that people understand, and people can be inspired to try to move up one level to another. And backdropping this whole thing, which also makes it tricky, is that this is completely independent from how we determine emissions week to week or month to month. The amount of emissions per week is fixed, and then all of this is just driving how it's distributed amongst the depositors and users of the system. So it's not, we can't say, oh, you stake this amount of Badger, you get this APY. We also don't control the Badger price. There's a lot of variables in it that make it tricky to understand. But what we kind of targeted was, okay, what proportion, if we're looking at just total amount of multiplier or boost adjusted non-native balance. So you take everyone's how much Bitcoin they have deposited and multiply by their boost. We take that value for right now and compare it to post this new model and see what's the increase. So, if you're currently 0.0025% of the $500 million worth of Bitcoin that's deposited in the system, if you're just looking at if we just did things pro rata, what does it look like if you're now staking a couple Badger, if you're staking 50% of the non-native value in Badger, if you're staking 100% of the non-native value in Badger, what does that look like? And what's that increase of your proportional share of that total amount? So with the new model, I think some of the numbers can be a little eye-opening. But what I guess we can get into is I'd love to hear if people have any specific questions around it. But I think what we wanted to do is really boost the people that were at the very top, and we kind of put a cap on it, meaning that if your stake ratio is 100%, you kind of topped out. And I think that's pretty good. You're staking, you're holding just as much Badger, dollar value of Badger than you are depositing dollar value of Bitcoin. And then, anything above that, any more Badger, it's not necessarily increasing your boost in any way. But, if that was the case for all the users in the system, then people would be holding, 400 or, well, I don't know what the non-native balance is, but let's just say it's, let's just call it $300 million. And if people were holding $300 million worth of Badger, that would be the minimum circulating supply market cap, which would be a bit higher than today. So, as you can see, like the dollar value, really, really matters. And that would be a pretty good situation. But anyways, I don't think it's to be expected that, a user that has 50 million in Badgers are going to also have 50 million in Bitcoin, but they should maybe have 1 million in Bitcoin to at least get them off zero and have a better ratio for at least earning some Badger. So the new model is kind of tiers based. It's goes from everyone having a multiplier, a minimum. If you hold no Badger, you just have a multiplier of 1, meaning that you're counted dollar for dollar, just your deposited Bitcoin balance when figuring out the distribution, all the way up to a multiplier of 2,000. So if you hold dollar for dollar the same amount of Badger and Bitcoin in the Badger system, then you're getting that the dollar value of your Bitcoin is getting multiplied by 2,000 when determining how much of the Badger distributions you should get. So what that kind of comes out to in practice is like a 44x multiple for if you were to be at 0 or if you're at 100% stake ratio. So pretty big gap there, but we're making it so that now instead of having it be leaderboard based and stepping your way down, it's fully driven by stake ratio. So you can know exactly where you are, what your stake ratio is, and what your multiplier is at that point. And that drives, your level of distribution. It's set up to have different kind of cliffs, and we did that based on just nice round numbers. You can see in the BIP, the numbers are to 0.1%, 0.25%, 0.5%, 1%, 2.5%, 5%, 7.5%, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 90, 100. So it's pretty nice round numbers. You can see exactly where you are. The stake ratio is a very simple calculation. If the NFT bit passes, then NFTs will be kind of counted in there to help boost your stake ratio. But that gets you your multiplier. And then kind of how much dollar value of Bitcoin is being counted when determining how much of the Badger that you get. Now, you can't control exactly what other people's ratios are, how much they're depositing. That's all very much in flux, but you can have a reasonable ability to say, okay, well, if I do this right now and everything else kind of stays standard, I should be getting X amount more Badger going forward. And that's, I think, what we'll kind of hint at today we're going to be releasing the first iteration of the Boost Optimizer. So it'll be basically a page where you can see your balance, your native balance, your non-native balance, play around with it, say, hey, if I buy a little more Badger, if I deposit a little more Bitcoin, what happens to my stake ratio? Right now, it's still going to be using just the old model, so you'll see your boost number there. And once the new model is implemented, there might be some UI changes to it. Mostly, it'll be backend changes though, and you'll be able to model and say, okay, well, I'm currently at a 500x boost. I've got a 25% stake ratio. I want to get to 1,000x boost. Okay, I need to get to 50% plus stake ratio. What can I do to get there? I need to buy X amount of Badger. Maybe you pick up a couple NFTs, you get a 20-30% boost from those. And then you can, dollar for dollar, you can pick up a little less Badger to get you there. So, NFTs aren't in modeling right now. I think something we'll probably include once we kind of get through this first phase of just including them, period. But, I think it just makes it a lot simpler and easy to be like, okay, I can get over this hump. I can go from the, 400x multiplier to the 500x by just buying, another $300 worth of Badger. And we're hoping this is kind of where people come from and want to hold Badger. And that's kind of becomes, this is the, affecting the supply side of the demand, or I guess the demand side of the supply and demand of the tokenomics is, people want to get Badger so they can hold it, so they can get a higher boost and then, get a bigger stake in the system. So, I guess the high level is, I think the time weighted boost was a good distribution mechanism to get Badger in the hands of folks that, joined and stuck around. And kind of seeded that. And then, if you can think of that almost like a proof of work, getting that and then holding on to it. And now it's kind of like we're transitioning to proof of stake in some way, so that people are, the more Badger you hold, the more Badger you're going to get, assuming you have, some non-native balance. So, similar how, I don't think you can necessarily do that out of the gate, because then you kind of get these concentrations of Badger. The people that have, got a lot distributed early on, have held on, have stuck around, they'll be rewarded by having, ample Badger to kind of boost their stake ratio and get, a good piece of the pie. So that's my, I guess, general overall overview. Feel free to toss your hand up if you want to come up and ask any questions or talk about the boost. I'll check in on the chat right now. A lot of questions about boost. I mean, about POAPs. I know it's something Will's working on, getting that a little more programmatic. Ingots. I don't know how to say that. Yes. If you don't claim the Badger tokens, I can't get the boost in the APY. I don't know if it's currently implemented, but it's definitely something we want to have implemented, where you don't actually have to claim for, unclaimed assets will count towards your native balance. So you don't actually have to claim your Badger or V-Badger. They will be counted. I'm actually not sure if that's implemented right now or not, but hopefully it will be soon if it's not currently implemented. Mitch, I don't know if you know offhand. It's not. Thanks, Mitch. It's not. Yeah, so it's not currently right now, but it's something that will be implemented at some point. Yeah, I mean, feel free to fire questions away in the chat. Put your hand up. It's a pretty big change. First of, what we kind of hope to be a number of things over the next couple months for updated tokenomics. And a lot of it's going to be, if you're in that chat, this is all, data driven. A lot of Google Sheets kind of went into this, trying out a bunch of different models, whether it's, multipliers under 1 to kind of bring values down. If it's leaderboard based, there's some suggestions for adjusting stake ratio. We think this is probably, at least from what we've been discussed, it kind of brought a lot of those things together, created some glyphs, easier to understand, and it's creates a strong impact. And all of these parameters can be adjusted by governments long term. So 2,000, 100% doesn't have to stay the max stake ratio. 2,000 doesn't have to remain the max multiplier. Those can all change, but this gets us off 0, and we can start. If this passes, let's see, where are we on governance right now? 46 voters. We need 4 more. Can we get 4 more voters to get quorum during this call? That'd be great. Cache area, yes. What kind of dev lift are we looking at for the new boost program? Thank you. Great question. A lot of this stuff, like the first Badger boost passed is governance, and it took a long time to kind of make it through the dev queue to get executed. And I think that's something we're getting a lot better at, is actually having some a tighter connection between things that are going through governance and getting into the actual dev queue and getting prioritized. There's 2 different components. There's the back end, which will be just figuring out the distribution. And I think that's going to be pretty painless, to be honest, because we're already figuring out stake ratios, and the stake ratios drive a multiplier. And this is actually an easier calculation. It's actually a linear, it's basically just a linear calculation where it's, I guess one thing I can touch on is, where the 2000 number came from. And it was really, we wanted, someone that's staking, 0.5x, we wanted like 0.1x to get, 1x multiplier. And then to get off of 0.1x, we wanted that to basically double. So like, if you're doing 0 to 0.1, you're not really getting any sort of multiplier. But we thought, okay, if you're getting over 0.1%, just like basically literally any Badger, just maybe over 0.1% of your native balance, we would like that, your multiplier to double. So that took us at 0.1%, a 2x multiplier. So, 200 divided by 0.1, you come up with 2000. So it's basically a linear calculation, just with the different levels being rounded. So we'll see exactly how we implement it. Might just be putting static values in a list that are referenced, but that should be pretty easy to do. Where we are talking about right now, where there'll be more lift, and this is probably actually more of a design and product and dev collective discussion, is around visualization of not just the boost optimizer and like the leaderboard, but also how we visualize APYs. Because someone who's got 0% stake ratio, someone's got 100% stake ratio, their Badger yield is going to be dramatically different. And so how do we illustrate that on the front end in a way that is, one, clear to users what they're currently receiving, but also entice them perhaps to go get some more Badger to improve their situation. So we got to figure that. That's kind of where we are in the discussions right now. We got the model together. Let's figure out how we can do this in the UI without kind of completely rejiggering everything. And then with the optimizer, I think we'll largely be able to use it as is, and that's going to be released, I think, in 3 hours. We'll kind of get that in the hands of folks, get feedback from people with the current model, and then we can take that into account when we make any tweaks with the new calculation. But once it's voted, I think we can have the backend implemented pretty quickly, and we'll decide if we want to do that first or wait till we have the UI component. I think we'll have to wait till at least we have the APY visualization together. I think Poe already has a suggestion for that we're kind of evaluating. I think it's to get a blank screen when you click Boost Optimizer. Yeah, that's I guess maybe the link got released, but I don't think the feature flag is getting flipped on until 12:30 Eastern. Oh, did we get 50 voters? Yeah, we got it. We got quorum. Good job. I'll just have office hours on anything we need to get votes for. Very nice. If you haven't voted on the NFT one as well, go vote there. I think we just got quorum on the Rari one yesterday, so we got quorum here. Would be great to get quorum on the NFT power up as well, or the NFT multiplier as well. It's kind of in the same vein, and also currently very kind of another barbell situation where the max boost for NFTs is falling between a lot of votes for 300 and a lot of votes for like 25. So we're very much in situation of kind of hanging things on both sides. So I would say definitely get out and vote there. We need another 14 votes to even approve the thing. So use this time to kind of put that out there. Anyone want to be brave and hop up on stage? No? All right. Yeah, not seeing much more in the chat. Usually with office hours too, we take the last, any extra time and touch on any other topics people want. So if you want to drop anything else or have any other questions, drop it in the chat. Or if you just want to talk about anything, feel free to hop up. Give it another minute or so, and if not, then I guess everything is perfectly clear and no concerns or questions, and we will just continue moving forward.
Yeah, John, I'll throw something in the mix. I think some of the great chatter in the group was around perhaps this buckets new users in with sort of chronic dumpers in this case, and I can't remember who came up with the idea, but it was a great idea around sort of allowing people to see their position as they're entering, and then perhaps giving an option to diversify some of their deposits or divert some of their deposit into Badger, so that it would ultimately set them up with a decent boost right off the bat, and then ultimately good behavior moving forward.
I think it's, so you're talking about like kind of a UI element where when you go to deposit Badger, it says like, hey, do you want to sell some Badger? And there's a slider and you can like adjust it. And yeah, I mean, I think that's a great idea, and I think we'll get there. But that is a bit of dev lift, right? There's like some smart contract work that needs to be able to be put in to like figure out that kind of a Zap type thing. And then there's quite a bit of like front end work. So I think like that's definitely something we should do, and it's interesting, but I don't think it's something that'll happen in the next month or two.
Yeah, fair enough. Just wanted to highlight, I thought it was a great idea to kind of like, as a beginning to your journey in the app, and being able to sort of set up a great boost and promote that sort of positive behavior that the power up kind of encourages.
Yeah, the get off zero thing is definitely interesting. There's a lot of discussion around that. People brought up like fixed value NFTs or like limited, like basically like coupons. Like it's basically a Badger coupon that only lasts for a month or two. That basically just like, okay, you get it counts for $100 in Badger or something like that. So you get off zero, and then you earn a little Badger, and then you're good to go. But then that stuff's always very hard to do with Sybil resistance, so people aren't just like minting a million of them or whatever and diluting Badger. So I think there's the flow of like, hey, I want to deposit Bitcoin, and then it's like, hey, do you want to sell some of it for Badger? I think is a little tricky. He said, there's definitely some work that we need to go into like that Zap, and it's definitely more gas intensive to then go do a swap. And me as like a Bitcoin holder, I'd be like, well, that's kind of weird, maybe. But maybe we could probably put some phrasing around it that would make it a little more palatable. I think there could be some other interesting things where just thinking it through, like let's say you we're able to do something where you're like, I'm going to deposit, but then lock your deposit, so we get like locked in TVL, and we do something like giving you, whether it's just we don't necessarily have to give you an NFT or Badger or anything like that, but like give you a synthetic appreciation to your native balance because you locked your Bitcoin. It's like, what can you bring of value that's not necessarily buying Badger, having Badger? And that could be like, okay, I'm going to lock my deposit for 6 months. And we're like, okay, here's, some percentage value of native balance for that time. That's not necessarily giving you Badger. It's not something that's transferable. And it's like, okay, you get, a non-native, a native static amount of, X amount up to this amount for that period or something. And then that gets you a little Badger. And then coming out of that, you got some Badger. It's giving up time element, and it's providing the system locked in TVL. But would be a good topic to for another Discord channel. Get people off zero, new user brainstorming.
For sure.
Cool. Yeah, Morzan, welcome up.
Hey
How's it
guys,
going?
hi Tritium, John, William, how are you guys? Um,
You're good.
no, no, awesome. No, basically, just my questions revolved around two things. Do you think maybe like the core team would be interested in seeing like a strategy memo and how like Badger's NFT strategy stands in light of compared to other projects, you know? So like obviously we're not the first, we're the only ones with the NFTs, but I think it'd be interesting to see like a full kind of report. They call it like strategic marketing MBA language, whatever. But just to see, you know, how we stand in light of other projects and like because I don't think other projects are given the same use of NFTs that we are, which is I think is great. Like I think we're breaking like new paths in like making NFTs more, giving them a more of a utility. So I think that's awesome. And so that's the first thing. And then the second question was just how after this gets voted on, how like soon will it be implemented, or like if there's still like room to like give suggestions and for feedback to be adopted.
So
Yeah. So go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Tritium.
I was gonna say, like on the first one, like I kind of agree, right? I don't know what the answer is, but like NFTs are like one of these things that everybody's excited about. And we're doing a lot of exciting things with them. And you never hear about that unless you're like following the Badger Twitter, right? Or unless you're like very close to Badger. So I do think, and I don't know, like I think we're focusing on a lot of other things more. And if you know some people or have some ideas or want to put together some sort of proposal about how we can get more messaging out about what we're doing as NFTs and how we're innovating there, that would be awesome. I don't know, Will, if you've thought about that at all.
Yeah.
Well, you're,
So
if you're trying to talk. Yeah, I guess I'll comment on it real quick on that specific on the NFT thing. Yeah, I think in general we are trying to figure out how we balance like comms with governance and development because this is going to be the first real implementation of the NFTs deeply into the system beyond just using them as drivers for airdrops or things like that that are more like ad hoc. Like this is going to be a key thing in the system. But we're not going to write up and publish it and say this is what it is, like what we're doing or what's implemented because it hasn't actually been voted on yet. But
Right.
I think so. What we've been talking about internally is trying to be a little bit more agile, getting stuff out, and then instead of let's say, hey, let's focus all the comms and the writing on like the launch day. Let's just kind of try to get stuff out, and then we can kind of like weave the long-term narrative on top. And if it's a third party that wants to kind of, we're all kind of third parties, whatever. It's just if it's someone else that wants to kind of do that, hey, this is what Badger did and why it's interesting or cool or whatever. That would be awesome. I would love that. Because right now, like the plan was kind of like, all right, we have the BIP, and then if the BIP passes, then we'll try to kind of modify the BIP into a Medium post, and we'll get that out there. But it has to kind of be after the BIP passes, after it passes and everything. But if there's support for someone else to kind of weigh in on there, would love that. Really, on all this stuff, like we've got our comms, which are like, hey, this is what's happening right now, and then on top of that, we have this is okay, larger implications of things and longer term stuff. And then what was the second? Sorry, what was the second?
The second question, which I think I can answer, was about, are we still taking feedback or is there opportunity to post a BIP? And actually, the other thing I wanted to say is I'm hoping we're going to have an office hours next week to talk about governance 2.0. I'm trying to like wrap that up next month and bring that to BIP. But I think like this is kind of a governance question, right? And I think the idea is that what we're trying to move towards is like we had a 1 or 2 week feedback round, right? There was a lot of conversations. At some point, we have to make a decision and do something. So I think now, like we did a bunch of feedback, we've taken the BIP, assuming that like there seems to be a reasonable amount of consensus and there's not like still a lot of questions. Then I think what we are looking to do is like get this done, right? And then come back around in a month or two and iterate again if there's still more questions or ways to tune it, because otherwise we just never finish.
Yeah, I think so for any new thing that we're putting out, the focus for the BIP is this is the model, and then these are the initial launch parameters of the model, with the idea that hopefully the model is good long term, and the parameters are totally up for governance control. If things shift, like the models should be able to withstand various market cycles and new things that arise, but maybe they drive where parameters should shift, and that is 100% controlled by governance. Anyone can put forward a proposal to shift the parameters. You can almost think of it like fees, which obviously hasn't been the most nimble to change, and there's a lot going on with fees. But we launched the vaults. We decided there's discussions way early on, like, okay, we're going to do withdrawal fees and performance fees. We're not going to do deposit fees. We're not going to do management fees. So that's kind of the model. We have these fees, and now what do we do within the model? We can adjust the percentages, and maybe put another layer of model on top to be more nuanced in certain scenarios. So yeah, for parameters within the model, totally open for continued discussion. And then for UI stuff, that'll be a continual discussion as well. And then the model can always be changed too, but I think the idea is hopefully that's good for a while, and then if there is a change, it's more like a long-term reevaluation.
I mean, I don't think I agree. Like that's not the first thing we should change, right? But like what we're doing now is changing the model. So we've had Boost for 3 months. We did it. We learned some stuff. We realized that it wasn't working that well, and now we're coming up with a new model, right? And it may take a few iterations. So all I'm saying is that, like, if over the next month or 2 or 3, we have a bunch of community members, people start using it, they're like, hey, this would be much better like this. We find some problems and we realize we want to change the model again. And there's like the energy and we're having that conversation, then we can do that, right? But what's important is that we like decide what we're going to do and finish things and move iteratively instead of always going back to the drawing board every time like there's a new idea.
So mostly why I had asked those 3 questions was because one, I can definitely contribute with like that type of report, just like comparing or like noting down what Badger is doing with the NFTs, and then like picking 2 or 3 like known or reputable projects, and also like kind of compare and contrast, but also just dive a little bit deeper into the model for like the common person and like the incentives maybe behind that, and like moving forward, like kind of like some suggestions or recommendations. So I could definitely jump into that, but just don't know if you guys have like a estimated deadline or like 2 weeks, 3 weeks deadlines, because like you mentioned, we want to iterate as a DAO monthly on this. So that's why I mentioned that. And yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't say there's a deadline necessarily. I think once the things pass snapshot, then it's that's what we're going to be implemented, and then any time after that is fine to get information out there, because we can assume that it'll be implemented as voted on. The actual implementation timeline will work out. The NFT stuff, I think, is going to be, at least the initial phase of it will be ready within the first maybe 2 weeks of it passing, and then the Boost power up should hopefully be ready in a similar time frame. Like I said, I don't think either one are huge lifts. So if we're done by this weekend, hopefully within the next 2 or 3 weeks, they can both be implemented, and then we can figure out when that post would make the most sense. I think any time along there is really fine.
Okay. Or if anything, I'll just follow up with either Tritium, you or William over like direct messages then.
Yeah, just DM both of us and we can get in a three-way chat and figure something out.
Okay, Roger.
Since we've got a little time left, unless there's other questions, but we just finished up the Gitcoin hackathon today. I think we just announced a Medium article. It was pretty cool. That was like the first time we put real energy into defining a hackathon and had a lot of different judges. There's quite a variety of different results. There's some fun stuff. There's some cool apps. So that might be something worth looking at.
Sweet.
Yeah, that was a great article, Tritium, and obviously thanks from the team for all the efforts on that front. But really interesting stuff. Some nice overviews of the bounties, of course, and then some great descriptions and sharing of all of the selected winners or recipients of the bounties. So encourage people to dig into that, and yeah, looking forward to doing more of that for sure.
Yeah, you guys want to drop the link in the office hours discussion chat?
Yeah.
Ethos Morse, I see your question. You're asking about the plan for the Bee Badger set emission. So that'll stay as is for now. So like I said, all of this is kind of on the distribution side.
No, we had a BIP like 6 months ago that said we were going to emit Bee Dig, and Bee Badger. I talked to DAP last week.
Is your question what's going to happen to the emissions going to the Bee Badger set, or are you asking Ethos more about when Badger will be admitted as Bee Badger? I was thinking it was the former that he was asking what's happening with emissions to Bee Badger. Okay. Yeah, so everything's going to stay as is. We have the new emission plan that got approved. Now that this boost stuff is hopefully kind of in development soon, the focus is shifting towards general tokenomics, and there's open chats in the Discord. There's a general tokenomics chat in the Discord where we're kind of picking that back up. And I think the question really is like, what's the use case for Bee Badger? And there's been a lot of discussion around that, and a lot of active discussion that needs to continue to happen. I think there's a couple things that can be done with it. I think it needs to be made productive, and not just be, it receives emissions for the sake of receiving emissions. Bee Badger currently, adds to your boost, and that's about it. So there's been discussions of, some sort of security module structure that stakers would then be basically providing support to set depositors. So that's, there's obviously a lot of hair on something like that. Using a native asset to backstop protocol deposits is a tricky thing. I think there's also stuff we could do to give it, native product, make it productive. Like take the underlying assets, deposit them, borrow Bitcoin, put it into Badger, and then take the Bitcoin earnings and then emit them to the Bee Badger stakers. With the new boost and it being 2000x multiplier for having 100% stake ratio, it's my opinion that if we were to just say we're not going to add utility to Bee Badger for a longer period of time, that it would make more sense to optimize for giving more emissions to the non-native sets, to the Bitcoin sets. But if you're holding a lot of Badger, you're getting way more of those emissions than people who don't hold Badger. So essentially you're getting emissions on your Badger. You just have to have Bitcoin to get there. So I think there's, vault strategies we could do for people who want to be Badger only stakers. There's vault strategies we could do that just make the Badger that people are holding more productive. Translate. Okay, if we said that we're just going to make it straight Badger holding drives your stake ratio, then that Badger's just sitting there. If we make it a vault like Bee Badger, then we can take that underlying Badger, add it as collateral, borrow assets against it, add those to Badger TVL, things like that. How that fits in with possibly doing a security module of sort, which I think there's general support for long term, but it's a hard thing to, it's a hard nut to crack. I don't know if anyone's done it perfect yet. That's an option. And then there's also how we handle basically driving revenue or the benefits from revenue back to token holders in some capacity, whether that's a straight revenue share like some projects do. There's been just much discussion around a redemption pool, basically building a baseline of Bitcoin that Badger or the Vault Badger is redeemable for. A number of things have been discussed, so I think if you want to chat about it, there's what is it called? The general tokenomics chat is where we've been talking about a lot of that right now, and I think that's where the effort's going to, for me at least, is going to kind of go back into now that we got a lot of this boost stuff cleared up, hopefully cleared up going forward, and let the chat with some more folks about it. We can hopefully work out some general high-level models or goals, and then work towards that, and then figure out kind of priorities, move towards BIPs, and go from there. Cool. Let's see. I don't see a lot of questions about POAPs. I think we hit all the questions.
I think you're good. Yeah, we should
Yeah,
just
I
have
think-
office hours about POAPs.
Real
Yeah.
quick, can you hear me? Like, do we have a POAP code, or can we give one out so that then we can set it up? Because then everybody won't ask for POAPs, right?
Yes,
We can-
I'm setting that up with Tom. So yeah,
Let's
give
just
me
pick a code now and give it out to everybody by voice, right? And then when it's set up, they can use it. But I don't know, like
The code is boost
POAP
me.
now. How about POAP now?
Well, it needs to be meeting specific, right?
yeah.
Okay.
Uh,
Yeah,
and
I,
just
I,
to-
Give something out, and it'll make life easier later. I promise.
we have an account set up, so it's just we're trying to differentiate between all of the events in such a way that makes sense. So just leave it with me. We'll be in better shape for our next event in terms of having it ready for everybody. But good feedback, Ben, and we'll get it set up.
So who should everybody DM to get this code then, and how should they show that they're in the meeting, right? Because otherwise I get 30 DMs about POAPs for the next 3 hours. and I
Yeah,
don't know
I'll
what-
announce at every meeting that people can come to me for POAPs and they don't need to DM you, and we'll just make it easier moving forward, and all will be done.
Sweet.
cool.
Cool.
All right. Well, I guess we'll give everyone a 3 minutes back. So yeah, thanks everyone for hopping in. Any other questions, you know where to find us on Discord. The chats are still open. Votes are still open. Keep an eye out for when they complete. The snapshots will be coming out probably tomorrow or this weekend, assuming things pass. So thanks everyone for hopping in. Thanks everyone that chatted before to get the boost update to where it is. Pretty excited about it. And yeah, I guess we'll chat on the next office hours. And yeah, thanks Will and Tritium for hopping up here and keeping the discussion going.